Bonjour Paris, bonjour. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, great pleasure to be here. I want to start by thanking Luc for organizing the show and also the summit. We do it for the love of the game, no, Luc? I'm going to say a lot of things that are pretty similar to what you said, which is a good news. I'm going to do it in English, but and certainly worse than you that you are a great speaker. So the first evidence for me is I want to point out is that it's going to be a bumpy road in the next 10, 15 years. So the evolution is not linear anymore in the automotive business as we have been used to. So it becomes clear that this kind of transition cannot be managed, just by setting deadlines and fines. It's going to be a transition that we need to manage strategically, with a strategic discussion with all the stakeholders, so that we can constantly adjust the trajectory. That's why events like this are, I think, very, very useful. And the second point is that what is happening to automotive is not just about us, in this room. This story is much, much bigger, right? Automotive is one of the pillars of European economy and prosperity. We're talking about 13 million jobs. We are talking about 8% of the union's GDPs. We're talking about 30% of the research and development budget in Europe. We're talking about 400 billion fiscal impact. So there's no government that works without the work that we all do. If you take the automotive industry away, European trade balance would be structurally in deficit. So that's just to give you an idea of the responsibility we have collectively to look at facts and make the right diagnosis and, of course, find the right solution. Europe has been, I can say that, I believe, the cradle of this industry. But we see today that Europe is not anymore the leader. Actually, no one can put their heads in the sand anymore. The center of gravity of automotive system has drifted toward China. Over 30% of new car sales are made there, so the market is there. And when it comes to EV, it's actually 60%. China is leading the way in electrification, with the BEV mix approaching 30%, and then you add on top of that all the new energy vehicle as they define them, like it means plug-in hybrids plus range extenders. And Chinese automakers set the new standards. Just a few years ago, people would have not believed it was possible to develop a car in 2 years, when the average here was 3 to 5. Well, the Chinese did it, and they are already moving forward and making it even faster. So with this kind of competitors, of course, it's going to be rock and roll, I would say. But the good news is that I think we know what we have to do now. We have to look at the truth. We have to observe our competitors, to adapt and to catch up before trying, to really face them and maybe one day overcoming them. At the end of the day, I think this competition is good. It's going to force us to, to step up as a whole system. And let's be very clear. This is a race that we won't escape, because EVs are part of the future, big part of the future, if not everything, despite all the ups and downs that we might hit on the road. In environmental terms, when we look at the whole life cycle of a car, there is no doubt that the electric is better than combustion. By 2030, cradle-to-grave carbon footprint of an EV made and used in Europe with renewable energy will be 70% lower than that of an ICE car. The European automotive industry is investing 250 billion in electrification. It's going to launch almost 100 new models in the next 2 years. I think Renault is probably one of the most committed European players to this transition. Over the past 4 years, we have devoted over 60% of our R&D budget to investment in the car of the future. We are investing and we are taking risks. Our employees in places like Douai or Maubeuge or Dieppe are working very, very hard to make, for example, the Renault 4 and the Renault 5 competitive in France, even if everyone told us a few years ago that this thing would be impossible. One thing is for sure, there will be no going back on electric. I'm not saying that, it would be the old thing. I'm not saying that only as a business leader. I'm saying that also as a car lover. In fact, EV is a better technology in many areas. Acceleration, silence, no vibration, lower running cost. EV also goes hand in hand with enhanced connectivity and autonomous driving. For sure, we have a strong competitivity challenge in Europe, like Luc mentioned. The data about are pretty straightforward, as, for example, also the Draghi report just recalled. You said, Luc, 40% labor cost higher than China. Electricity cost is up to not 2 times, but actually 3 times what is in the USA. Just to give an idea of the importance of this thing when it comes to EV. Think that the cost of electricity consumed in France to make a Renault 5 is almost double the cost of labor. That's what it is. In other words, the auto industry in the electric age has become an energy-intensive industry. But this, for example, is still not recognized as such. It seems pretty obvious that ensuring a decarbonized and competitive energy supply, for example, around 50 euro the megawatt, should be a priority. But the industrial players also have some cards to play when it comes to offsetting the labor cost gap. I'm thinking of what we could do, for example, to give more flexibility to our organization, taking advantage of their global footprint. For example, innovation to boost productivity, such as follow-the-sun models, that is continuous development thanks to complementary teams located in different time zones. And of course, there's the deployment of the AI, for example, in manufacturing that we see in Renault. Actually, France and Europe automotive issue runs deeper than these classical topics of labor and energy cost. The challenge isn't just about new competitors coming in. It's about adapting to a radically new technological landscape, and a landscape where technological innovation is getting back at the center of this picture. For 150 years, the game was about managing a kind of a mature technology. Now, we are in the context where technology has become very, very evolutionary, on top of extreme volatility in demand, in prices, in geopolitics. Let's be clear. With EVs, we're talking about a radically different value chain with different materials, different industrial process, different suppliers, geography, talents, competence, and customer touchpoints. The traditional boundaries of the automotive sector are actually moving. And on this new playing ground, everything is moving because the EV shifts also opens the opportunity to reinvent everything. Previous constraints are not relevant anymore. For example, no more combustion engine means a shorter hood and a maximum interior space. We know it as, car develops. We should recognize that the good old recipes won't be enough anymore to thrive in this new environment. Looking for efficiency, for example, or scale was okay, so long as the road was straightforward. But now that we have to deal with many curves, striving to that only risk sending you just over the cliff. Actually, now, our top priority in Europe should be to massively inject innovation and agility into the system at every level, in the business and for the public authorities. For everyone, this is actually a major culture shift. Look at what the Chinese are doing. It's not business as usual. It's on the innovation side that they have managed to take the lead. In operation and value chain coverage, for example, companies like BYD, they vertically integrate 75% of the EV value chain. And also in the ability to revolutionize the user experience. Xiaomi, I take an example, managed to integrate over 200 product categories into a connected ecosystem that seamlessly merges with that of the customer. So there we are, the car becomes part of the user's digital ecosystem. The problem when it comes to putting innovation at the core of our game is that the European machine structurally is not designed for that. Start with demography. In Europe, the average new car buyer is now 56 years old. It was 47 in 2005. In China, buyers are in their 30s. This makes a big difference when you have a younger consumer pulling the whole system towards innovation, and for example, software. Actually, it's not that Chinese demography is better than ours. Right? It's that they are not managing it the way we do. Behind this, there is the whole problem of purchasing power of middle classes and an aging system that delays the arrival of young people in life, in adult life. Not to mention the prevailing pessimism with the war, for example, in Eastern Europe and so on. So the patient is actually not in a good shape, but regulation, instead of helping him get back on his feet, looks more like a bloodletting. The cost of failure in Europe is 10 times higher than in the US. For example, because it's more complicated to start up again after a bankruptcy. Just the opposite of what is needed to encourage risk-taking. The piling up of regulation siphons off a huge proportion of innovation efforts, up to 25% today of OEM research and development. We're piling fines and deadlines, while the US are massively stimulating their industry, and the Chinese are organizing it through plans, again, with massive aids. $230 billion in China across the value chain, around $400 billion injected into the US economy through the Inflation Reduction Act. What's happening with the CAFE 2025 regulation is, I think, very symptomatic of European approach. 16 billion euros in fines potentially falling on the heads of European automotive industry, all because the market conditions were not put in place, but by those who set the rules, as Luc said. The bottom line is that Europe's R&D effort is less than half of the United States, and responsibility for this lies with entrepreneurs like us, governments, and financial markets alike. Cost cutting must not be a mask for Malthusianism. To reset the whole system and push innovation, we must start with demand, with the customer. When you want to push a new technology that's not mature yet, you must make sure that you have a stable purchase support system. That's what we saw when the market share of electric cars in Germany fell, from 16 to 12% in a matter of a day after the end of subsidies. On the short term, we need urgently answer to the CAFE 2025 issue. The EV slowdown is only a side event in the story. But the problem is that side events can sometimes be deadly. Structurally, we also need to ramp up the charging infrastructure rollout if we really want people to buy EVs. On the OEM side, we have to pay close attention to preserving residual value for our customer. Otherwise, we make customer wait and see, and we just break the market. On top of that, I think we should remember Henry's Ford lesson. Our customers are also our employees. So there's a whole subject around the purchasing power of the middle class that needs to be put back at the top of the pile today. In terms of regulation, we need to move towards a strategic, holistic vision based on a value chain approach and a collective game, as you mentioned, Luc. I'm convinced that it's by playing collectively that the European industry has the best chance of regaining the upper hand. The public authorities can make the difference by orchestrating the thing, promoting the structuration of ecosystem. This means, for example, developing standardization to optimize our engineering resources. When it comes to software, for example, 70% of the technical content of cars and infrastructures could be shared between automakers without changing anything for the consumer. Taking an ecosystem approach would also mean setting up green economy zones along the lines of special economic zones, or supporting and de-risking private investment to help the value chain get off the ground. Above all, it means adopting also a horizontal approach, because the major challenges ahead, notably digital and energy transition, they actually cut across traditional sectors. And of course, adopting this open and collaborative approach to boost the structuration of new value chain in Europe is also our responsibilities as entrepreneurs. For example, when Renault works with Volvo and trucks and CMA CGM to reinvent last mile logistic, or with Suez to innovate in the circular economy and recycling. This is what we are doing, and we should do more of that, all. Finally, how we engage with China will also be crucial. There's an opportunity that we have no right to miss, learning from our competitors and imitate them when they do better than us. This is what the Europeans, the Fiats, the Citroëns, the Renault, did a century ago in the United States when Ford revolutionized manufacturing with the production line. That's what the Chinese have also done more recently with us. So the Europeans need to engage with China and connect to the Chinese ecosystem to capture the best of it in a spirit of co-opetition. That means competition and cooperation that pulls everyone upwards. I think that now is not the time to be inward looking. On the contrary, I believe that our industry in Europe has never been in greater need of openness and team spirit. And that's what I've come to share here with you today.
Please follow me.
Thanks. Here?
Yes, it's working. We have the time for a few follow-up questions. In the auto industry recently, we have seen many profit warnings. Renault has not had a profit warning, but many of your competitors are telling us that time is tough. Do you think we're in a cyclical downturn like we see very often in this industry, or do you think that the problems the industry is facing is more structural and that we're at a pivotal moment or times of really big shifts?
I mean, look, I think I can't comment on, the CEOs of the other company. They know better what is in the box, no, at home. I think, let's say, at least at European level, there's a lot of uncertainty on 2025. We see that in the showrooms. We see that there's no much traffic into the thing. Renault is right now in a kind of a different case because, there is a lot of new product launches, so you can ask to some of the Renault dealers are probably sitting here, in the room that recently it didn't go so bad for us. But I'm worried for 2025. The biggest uncertainty is this CAFE regulation for me, because it's going to force us to do things that we shouldn't do. And, Luke mentioned that, for example, cutting production of combustion engines, cars, or pushing too much on the EV, breaking the toy. I think this is very dangerous. So that's the biggest uncertainty. That's why we urge authorities to make a decision quickly and then, of course, engage in the discussion about 2030, 2035 to create the condition to get into this direction. Because I can tell you, being, involved into the ASEA, I meet, and speak with all my colleagues. There's nobody in the automotive industry that actually discussed the direction about decarbonizing transport. It's just a matter of, the way, how do we do it, at which speed, etc. But 2025 for me is, very much dependent on the way we decide on that particular topic.
When should we have a decision on CAFE and the 15 billion euros you mentioned during your speech? Is it in the next few months?
I think we need to enter in the year with clarity on that. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that they can pragmatically, in a way or another, lift the thing. And it needs to happen in the next weeks. And yeah, this is, let's say, our wish.
Okay. In the auto industry in the past, there used to be only one model. Size mattered. You had to be the biggest to have economy of scales. Do you think that because we're at times of big technological changes and that the market is changing, there is room for other approach that you can be a different type of OEM, that not all the OEM needs to look the same? I know there has been exception in the past with a smaller but on kind of niche market or very high value market, but for the big OEM, or do you think that the direction will be more consolidation in the years to come, simply to get
yeah,
bigger
that's
and
what
bigger?
I said, and I kind of keep repeating that, since years. And I think Renault is a good example of that. We're making much more money now that we're selling 2.5 million cars than when we were selling 4. So that's a good example of that. Just because we actually do the things better, we're focused. We're able to control the game and the beast and the system. So I think that the automotive industry will always be an industry of scale, because it's a very capital-intensive industry. But this kind of model it's actually more adapted to situation where you have a demand that is stable or growing, and you work in a mature technology. So you have 15 people that are able to do the same thing. You group them in three group of 5, and then instead of doing 15 times the thing, they do it 3 times. Okay, so that's the logic of the thing. But so it will always be a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient anymore, because when you are in a world like the one that we will experience, where demand is very volatile and the technology is very evolutionary, you better organize yourself with very compact teams, a very agile organization that can resist to the shocks and to the fluctuations, and that is very oriented to innovation. So normally in the automotive industry, everybody knows that we were, I would say, into a process of development that was sequential and convergent to the launch of a product on a technology that where it was foreseeable, what could happen next. And now you have to work basically with scenarios. Look at the things we're forced to do. We have to invest in electric, we have to invest in hybrid, we have to invest in e-fuels, in biofuels, and you have to be able to play that kind of game, which is a completely different game. So you have to change your organization. So if you are able to master at the same time a big size with that kind of agility and orientation to let's say, to innovation, then of course you're going to become a winner. In my case, I'm heading a kind of a mid-sized organization. I try to be hyper agile, fast, and oriented to innovation.
But at the same time, you have a multiplication of partnership with Ampere in the electrical motors, but in software also with others. How can you make sure that you will keep where the real value is made in the future, and that the margins will not go to all your partners?
I mean, look, the thing is, if you take a little bit of perspective, 70% of the content of our cars in the hands of suppliers. So in fact, I'm asking myself how much value we actually kept in the last 30 years in the automotive company, right? And I think long term this was a problem for us. And for a long time, suppliers did actually more money than us. And more recently, that thing flipped. That means that the old business model, even for them, doesn't work anymore. So I believe we need to find a different relationship with our supplier, more long-term, more partnership-oriented, where everybody finds its own benefit and can keep innovating and can keep also, in a way, the IPs of the intellectual property of this kind of thing. In the case of Renault, 4 years ago when I came, we were losing like 40 million euros a day, including Saturday, Sunday, Easter, and Christmas, right? So I actually didn't have the money to invest on all the things where we had to invest. So I had to find a kind of a smart way to partner with people to share the risk and share the investment. We try to look at cooperating with, some of the best in their specific sector. Think at Google, think at Qualcomm, think at ST Microelectronics. I mean, we struck like 20 deals during the thing, so we were able to be at the same time on the trend without engaging massively assets or or fixed cost or investment on the thing. And now that we are on those kind of value chains that are emerging around our business, then now we can understand where we can verticalize, where we can go into the vertical, right? So you have to see not the picture, you have to see a movie. So we have done a lot of horizontal, and now we are looking where we can dig in the thing.
One last question in less than a minute. On the EV market, do you think that we have reached a plateau or a peak in Europe? Do you think that prices will really go down, that the market will boom in the next few years?
I mean, one of the things that people have to understand is the following. I mean, outside, I know you guys understand that very well because you are into the thing, but battery is the biggest cost of an electric car, okay? So price of a battery is 2-3 times the price of a combustion engine, depending on the size. So the key thing to reduce cost of electric cars is actually the battery cost. And battery technology is not like semiconductor technology that obeys to the more laws where you double productivity and performance of the thing every 18 months. I mean, in best case, you gain 7-8% performance of a battery. So we know that because we've been doing electric cars for 15 years. And we were able to reduce the cost of a battery of a Renault Zoe after 10 years by 50% because of that kind of productivity. So it's very important that when people say, you're going to do a cheaper car and then you're going to sell electric thing. I mean, the electric car will not be cheaper for a long time because it goes down. And we need first to reduce the cost and then to reduce the price. Because if we sell those things, if we do the opposite, we're going to lose a lot of money. And that normally is a strategy where very short legs, right? So I think that, nobody asked to Steve Jobs in 2007 to actually sell the iPhone half of the price than the Nokia 6510 with the green screen and the buttons. I remember that, I'm old enough. It was double the price and nobody complained, right? So electric cars are structurally more costly than the thing. I mean, and then you can talk about usage is cheaper, maintenance is cheaper, etc. But these people don't want to understand that they don't want that to take that into, their equation.
Thank you very much, Luca.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. Have a good show.
Thank you. Over there.